In the early 17th century, Sweden was the most powerful country in Europe, but unlike other European powers, it had no colonies in the New World. However, that would soon change. In 1632, the Swedish king Gustavus Adolphus was killed in a battle. His daughter Christina was only 6 years old and too young to rule the country. So, Sweden was ruled by the chancellor, a man named Axel Oxenstierna. Like the king who had just been killed, he wanted to acquire territory in the New World for Sweden, but he needed help from somebody who knew America well. Peter Minuit was just the man for the job. He had been the governor of New Amsterdam, a Dutch colony which later became New York. He also had explored the Jersey Shore and Delaware Bay. Minuit soon met with Oxenstierna to tell him about the Rocks, a natural harbor up the Delaware River, where Sweden could start its own colony in America. The land was fertile. Streams provided fresh water, and in the forests were enough trees to build the colony, with plenty more to send back to Sweden for shipbuilding. The Swedish government purchased 2 ships, a Dutch-built ship named the Kalmar Nickel and a smaller ship, the Fogelgrip. They left Sweden in November of 1637 and arrived at the Rocks at the end of March 1638.
The Swedes were the first ones to cut down trees and use those fallen trees to build log cabins. Let me tell you how a fine house like this was first built. The fireplace was made of stone, dragged in from outside, some even coming out of the creek, and it was put up after the walls were built into the corner so that as the fire burnt, those stones heated. And even in the middle of the night, as that fire died down, there was enough warmth to keep this family nice and snug. Building a cabin is hard work. So, before the settlers started to build, they looked for large, flat rocks in the ground like these. When they found at least 3 that were large enough and far enough apart for the cabin, they started to build. Then they only had to drag stones to make the 4th corner. Cabins like this were built without a frame. In fact, these cross corners support the weight and are driven down on boulders in the ground. And that's what supports the weight of the cabin, and that's particularly important when you're close to a stream such as this one. The notching, which is used to hold the cross logs together, was shaped differently in different parts of Sweden. The settlers trade things that they have made themselves. And I trade things that were brought from Europe, such as china, glass bottles, things made from good Swedish copper, and even silk ribbons.
Long before the Swedes sailed to the New World, other people had been living in the Delaware Valley for many generations. These people called themselves the Lenape, which in their language means the people. They lived in small villages of bark-covered houses called longhouses. The women were successful gardeners and were able to provide plenty of beans, squash, and corn. Although the Lenape ate corn all the time, Europeans had never seen it before. The Indians taught the Swedes many of their corn recipes. They especially valued anything made of metal, since they couldn't make these things themselves. For these common European items, the Lenape were willing to trade large numbers of pelts. Buyers in Holland, Poland, and Germany were ready to buy all the furs the Swedes could offer.
Hello. They call me Black Anthony, or as the Swedes say, Anthony Svart. I was purchased as a slave in the West Indies. Since 1643, I have been working for the governor of New Sweden. Today, I am no longer a slave. I am a freed man. Black Anthony, Delaware's first black settler.
I am called Johann Campanius. I was a priest in the Church of Sweden. In 1643, I was assigned by the Archbishop to be chaplain here in New Sweden in America. The fine church you see here is the new church. It was built in 1698.
The old log church was not as grand as this. Everybody came to church. If they didn't, the governor's soldiers would get after them as soon as the church bell began to ring. But I didn't just preach from the pulpit. I traveled to settlers' homes by canoe or on foot, and everyone had to know the 5 pieces of Dr. Martin Luther's small catechism. The Indians sometimes know it better than our own Swedes. Of course, I also visit their villages. They love to hear the Bible stories, and I've even translated the catechism into their Algonquin language.
Good dog. I'm Sven Skute, a professional soldier. I'm Swedish, but I was born in Finland, and before I came here to New Sweden, I was a lieutenant in a Finnish cavalry regiment in Germany. From the beginning, in 1638, New Sweden always had a military garrison. In fact, the first colonists were almost all soldiers, 21 to be exact. We've had 1,000 people living in New Sweden at one time or another, but our colony has always remained small. A lot of farmers wanted to come to New Sweden to set up farms. So by February of 1654, we had enough people. My wife and I, Johan Riesing, the new governor, and 350 settlers, mostly Finns, left Gothenburg in Sweden. Of course, Swedes still immigrate here, but it isn't the same. Now there's a Dutch governor. Still, he's a pretty good governor. He likes us Swedes and Finns. He says that we are honest, we work hard, and he wants more of us to come to his colony.